In part 1, we looked at the rise of the Persian Achaemenid Empire. This was the fastest rising and the most powerful empire in the ancient world. We pick up the story with Xerxes ruling the Persian Empire. After a number of military blunders against the Greeks, Xerxes has returned to Persia, where he was eventually assassinated and Artaxerxes ascended to the throne. The death of Xerxes, who was a cruel and weak king, marks the point in time that the Persian Empire entered into a period of relative decline. The son of Xerxes, Artaxerxes, came to power in 465 BCE. The troubled succession had a ripple effect throughout the empire, and rebellions broke out in Bactria and Egypt. The rebellion in Egypt took 10 years to resolve, and Artaxerxes' reign was later troubled by another revolt in Syria. Artaxerxes pursued a policy of weakening and subverting control in Athens by secretly funding their enemies in Greece. The Athenians responded by attacking the Persians in Cyprus and other Ionian cities, but they did not have a significant impact. Artaxerxes negotiated a peace with the Greeks, which became known as the Peace of Callias. The Persians gave up their ambitions in Greece, but retained their control of the Ionian cities. Artaxerxes' death in 424 BCE was followed by a period of instability featuring coups and counter-coups until one of Artaxerxes' illegitimate sons, Ochus, took the throne. He assumed the royal name Darius II and restored stability after this turbulent time. He pursued a policy of supporting Sparta against Athens, and the latter was decisively defeated in 404 BCE. In that year, however, Darius died, and at his death, a major rebellion in Egypt led to that country breaking free of Persian control for several decades. Darius II was then succeeded by his son, Artaxerxes II. His brother Cyrus, satrap of Lydia in Asia Minor, hired 10,000 Greek mercenaries and rebelled. He marched on Babylon, but was stopped by the Royal Persian army at the Battle of Cunaxa. Cyrus was killed, and 10,000 Greeks, now far from home, fought their way back to Greek territory over hundreds of miles of hostile territory. An account of their adventures was produced by one of their commanders, Xenophon. This would have an important influence on later generations of Greeks, including a Macedonian prince called Alexander, who would later test the Persian Empire, wondering if they were as powerful as they seemed. Artaxerxes reigned for 45 years, from 404 BCE to 358 BCE, the longest of any Achaemenid monarch. He failed in an attempt to reconquer Egypt in 373 BCE, but was more successful in his dealings with the Greeks. When Sparta invaded Asia Minor, he funded Sparta's enemies, and this had the desired effect of provoking war between the Greek cities. Artaxerxes was then able to negotiate a peace with them, which was later referred to in Greek history as the King's Peace of 387 BCE. This peace agreement recognized Sparta's dominance on the Greek mainland, while restoring full Persian control over the Greek cities of Asia Minor. Artaxerxes also had to campaign against steppe nomads on his Central Asian frontier, whom he soundly defeated. In 372 BCE, a number of satraps in Asia Minor rebelled, and it took 10 years to overcome them by a mix of military action, diplomacy, and compromise. In 358 BCE, Artaxerxes II died and was succeeded by his son Artaxerxes III, who reigned from 358 to 337 BCE. His reign was one of constant struggle to keep the empire together, as internal and external forces tried to tear it apart. Like most of his predecessors, he had trouble with the Greeks, this time Athens again, but forced this city to a peace. Like his father, he had to campaign on his Central Asian frontier. It was the satraps, particularly of Asia Minor and other western provinces, who caused him most problems. He faced repeated rebellions from his own satraps, and he even ordered the demilitarization of the satrapies of Asia Minor. This order was ignored, of course, but in 353 BCE, the royal forces defeated the satraps' armies and they were disbanded. In 351 BCE, Artaxerxes intended bringing Egypt completely back under control, but this ended with a significant defeat for his military forces. The satraps of Phoenicia, Asia Minor and Cyprus saw this defeat and started to rebel against the king again. It took Artaxerxes and his generals until 343 BCE to stop these rebellions, but only with significant help from Greek troops. In the course of this war, the historic Phoenician city of Sidon, the center of the revolt, was utterly destroyed. Artaxerxes followed the ending of this revolt by another attempt to again reconquer Egypt. He collected a huge army whose troops had been hardened in the fierce war against the western satraps and containing large contingents of Greeks, and marched into Egypt. He defeated the Egyptian pharaoh Nectanebo II at the Battle of Pelusium. The Persian forces were then quickly able to occupy the rest of the country. Artaxerxes, who had become vengeful because of the opposition he encountered throughout his reign, sought revenge and set about looting and destroying temples, razing city walls, and terrorizing the people of Egypt. His intentions seem to have been focused on weakening the country through very heavy taxation, persecution of the priests, and frequent shows of force so that Egypt would never again revolt against Persia. The whole Persian Empire was now at last firmly under Artaxerxes' control, and the remaining years of his reign were stable and peaceful. One development worried the Persian king, however. This was the growing power of Macedonia under its able and ambitious king, Philip II. Artaxerxes employed diplomacy to try and limit Philip's influence and sent troops to aid his enemies to resist Macedonia's advance. In 337 BCE, Artaxerxes was murdered along with most of his family by Vizier Bagoas, who engineered the rise of Darius III, a nephew of Artaxerxes IV, to the throne. Historians think that Darius III forced Bagoas to swallow poison. Little did he know at the time, but Darius III would be the last Achaemenid king of the empire, and the days of the Persian Empire were numbered. In 334 BCE, King Alexander III, the king of Macedonia, who would later become known as Alexander the Great, invaded Asia Minor. He defeated Persian armies at Granicus in 334 BCE, Issus in 333 BCE, and Gaugamela in 331 BCE. Susa and Persepolis surrendered in 330 BCE. He then headed to Ecbatana, where Darius III had fled. Darius was taken prisoner by his relative Bessus, satrap of Bactria. As Alexander approached, Bessus had Darius murdered. He then declared himself Darius' successor as Artaxerxes V before retreating into Central Asia. However, he was intercepted and brought to Alexander. He was put on trial and executed. Meanwhile, Alexander had Darius' body given an honourable burial in Persepolis. Alexander the Great was ultimately responsible for the fall of the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire was one of the most impressive civilizations that the world has ever seen. This is not only because of their military might, but because of their worldviews and achievements. State taxes seem to have been conceived and introduced in the Persian Empire under Cyrus II and Cambyses. Subjects were mostly obliged to deliver only gifts. While the system of state taxation already existed under Cyrus II, it was not regulated, and people who did not pay taxes had to deliver gifts, and vice versa, until regular taxes were first introduced under the rule of Darius I. These taxes were used to build public works and maintain the roads. Persians also created one of the first water supply systems called qanats. A kanat is a gently sloping underground channel that carries water from an aquifer or water well to houses and fields. It is used for the irrigation of crops and for drinking water. It is an old system of supplying water from deep wells via a series of vertical access shafts. It is still a reliable means of supplying water to human settlements and for irrigation in hot, arid and semi-arid climates. It was first developed by the Persian people in Iran around the 1st millennium BC, and these ideas slowly spread westward and eastwards from there. The kanat tunnels, which could be several kilometers long, were hand-dug and the same size as the person digging the tunnel. The vertical shafts, sunk at intervals of about 20 to 30 meters, were used to remove excavated materials and also acted as ventilation and access for repairs. Main kanat tunnels sloped down from pre-mountainous alluvial fans to an outlet in villages. From there, the canals distributed water to fields for irrigation. These structures were built with great scientific vision and allowed Persian farmers to survive during long dry periods without surface water. These kanats are still used in many places in China, Morocco and America. The Persian Empire's ideas of tolerance, acceptance and religious freedoms led to the first recorded charted ideas of human rights. The armies of Cyrus the Great, the first king of ancient Persia, conquered the city of Babylon in 539 BCE. Cyrus freed the slaves and gave people the right to choose their own religion by establishing racial equality. This declaration was recorded in a baked clay cylinder known as the Cyrus cylinder. The Cyrus cylinder was discovered among the ruins of Babylon in 1879 and is currently at the British Museum. This declaration has been translated into all 6 official languages of the United Nations, and its provisions parallel the first 4 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Persian Empire grew rapidly from a group of small tribes into the largest empire of the ancient world. They were an aggregation and mixture of various cultures and religions under one rule. Some poor military and political ideas meant that the threat of Alexander the Great and the Macedonians was not taken as seriously as it should be. It seems that the last Persian kings forgot the humble beginnings of their own empire and did not perceive the similar beginnings and background of the Macedonians as a threat. This, ultimately, was their downfall as the Persian Empire suffered the pain of progress.
This is Steaming Cup of Reason. I would like to express my deepest thanks to all Pain of Progress viewers for the incredible support you have given to this series and for the show as a whole. It has been an incredible journey, and I have been blessed to share my passion for history with each and every one of you. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to everyone who has been part of the project by providing voiceover talent as well as assistance with research. Your contributions to the Pain of Progress are greatly appreciated. As the Pain of Progress prepares to move to its own home on YouTube, we will be working hard to bring you Series 5, which will be the Pain of Progress as you have never seen it before. If you have a passion for history and would like to help us take this show to the next level, you can do so by subscribing to the new channel. You can also support the project on Patreon, which helps me to continue creating the best content possible. I thank you for watching, and I look forward to welcoming you all to the new official Pain of Progress channel at the link in the description below. You continue to inspire me. Thank you all.